chairing this session. The title is Bandwidth on Deathbed. And the context of this session is about some questions and some concerns that arise from the deployment of bandwidth on demand services. So our speakers here are presenting some thoughts and some solutions and some ideas looking back at the deployment of bandwidth on demand services. So our first speaker, he's a young talent in SurfNet. That's Arnout Terpstra. The stage is yours.
Thank you, Leonidas. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming here on the last day, as Leonidas said. My name is Arnout Terpstra. I work for SurfNet for 1.5 years now. So let's just start. In his keynote on Monday, Barend Mons made it very clear that the amount of data available to researchers is growing very rapidly. So to process all this data, they need huge amounts of computing power and storage. And some institutions choose to purchase their own hardware. But often, or for some researchers, this is just not enough because they need more. So in the Netherlands, we have our sister company, SurfSara, offering several services to researchers, such as an HPC cloud, a supercomputer, storage, etc. But since SurfSara is located in Amsterdam, how does the researcher, who might be everywhere in the Netherlands, get his data to the place where it needs to be? In this example, we have a researcher in Delft, located here, who generates a lot of data on flooding. Using LiDAR technology, he made a 3D model of the landscape in the Netherlands. And he can calculate what water would behave like if the water levels would rise. In the Netherlands, apparently we're famous for our water management, so makes sense. But in the University of Groningen, located here, they have some state-of-the-art, super high-resolution 3D visualization technology, which might come in very handy for visualizing the results of the research in Delft. But to generate this visualization, which consists of multiple 3D streams, you need an enormous amount of computing power. So the researcher needs the HPC cloud in SurfSara because what he wants to calculate is more than Delft has to offer him. The researcher probably doesn't have very advanced networking knowledge, so how does he get his data to where it needs to be? He might use the internet. We will probably find out quickly that it's not the best solution. Instead, we, SurfNet, but other NRANs as well, offer new technologies to help researchers with these kinds of problems, such as lightpaths. A lightpath is a fast, dedicated, and secure point-to-point connection independent of the routed internet. So a complete lightpath, which might run from Delft to SurfSara and from SurfSara to the University of Groningen, consists of two parts. A part the NRAN is responsible for between the points of presences of the institution, and a part the institution is responsible for between the point of presence on the campus to the instrument on the campus, or maybe the desk of the researcher. It could be anywhere. So viewed from the researcher, there are several stakeholders involved in delivering the technology he needs. We have the institution who wants to help the researcher, but for some services is dependent on what SurfNet has to offer. As SurfNet, we also want to help the researcher, but we are dependent on Delft getting our lightpath, or the lightpath of the researcher, to the place where it needs to be. And then we have the researcher who just wants the IT stuff to work and is dependent on what SurfNet and Delft can offer him. So unfortunately, we've learned from experience that there are all sorts of organizational and technical obstacles that can result in the lightpath not working or not being delivered at all. Let me just give an example of such a case. So this is a campus network. Oh, sorry. This is a campus network, and here we have the NRAN network, SurfNet network. And experience has taught us that one of the biggest obstacles for delivering a light path to the researcher is the integration with the campus network. So suppose there's a 1 gigabit light path coming in to the campus network, and this HPC cluster needs to be connected to the light path. But as you see, there's a tiny part on the campus which does not operate at 1 gigabit. The result is that the entire light path, including the piece on the NRAN network, is not operating at 1 gigabit. Or another example, as you see, the light path is coming in through the firewall. Maybe the firewall slows things down. I will get back to this later. So the real problem is, as an NRAN, we often think of new technologies to help researchers, but sometimes institutions fail to integrate it with their current infrastructure. So someone needs to orchestrate the entire end-to-end chain. Otherwise, things like a light path won't be successful. So both the NRAN part and the campus part needs to be orchestrated at once. But as an NRAN, we cannot interfere with the campus network. It's up to the institutions themselves. So how do we solve this? As SurfNet, we thought, okay, what we need is some sort of playing ground where all stakeholders, the researcher, the NRAN, the institution, can experiment with new technologies. So a couple of years ago, we started a contest called Enlighten Research. And a researcher can submit a proposal and can win free infrastructure to advance his research. Thanks to this contest, all stakeholders learned valuable lessons. So the researcher, the NRAN, and SurfNet. For example, for the first edition, we thought, let's just give the institution and the researcher a light path for free. And then they will figure out how the integration part works. So we kind of pushed the technology to them and thought this will solve itself. Unfortunately, that was not the case. Some researchers succeeded, some institutions, but others didn't. So for the second edition, we thought, let's give them some advice on the technology. Let's give them advice on how to integrate the light path with their network. Some listened and did it successful. Others still failed. So for the third edition, we realized we need to look at the entire chain. So we appointed a project leader, a technical project leader, who both gives advice as well as makes sure that every stakeholder in the entire chain is doing his part. This also helped, but unfortunately, still institutions were struggling. So we needed to look further. Maybe we can solve this problem with technology. So in SurfNet 7, our new network, every institution gets a multi-services port. For instance, we have a 10 gigabit per second multi-services port interface. And the institutions can choose themselves which services they run on this interface. You can do one light path of 10 gigabit, or 2 of 5, or maybe 10 of 1. It doesn't matter. You only pay for the interface, not for the services you run on top of it. It's a great development, since it's a lot cheaper for institutions and researchers to work with light paths. But does this solve the problem of integration with the campus network? The answer is no, because the MSP operates at the point of presence. So it still needs to get to the place where it needs to be on the campus. So we've seen two developments: the Enlighten Research Contest, a playground to test new technologies for free or for a low price, and a multi-services port to make it easier for institutions to work with light paths. But still, there's this problem. So how can we solve this? By now, we already have quite some experience with light paths, some more successful than others. So what have we learned from this? But more importantly, what have our institutions learned from this? Because who can they better learn from than from each other? So with that in mind, I visited several institutions and asked them about their experiences, the positive and negative experiences, the lessons they had learned, the things they would keep or do differently the next time. And I bundled these findings into a document called a cookbook. cookbook Lightpaths. This cookbook will hopefully help institutions who will want to work with lightpaths in the future. Let me now briefly go through the different chapters of the cookbook to explain what kinds of information it contains. One of the first problems I encountered was that researchers had a bad idea on what lightpaths are really. They don't have a lot of experience or knowledge on networking, and nor shouldn't they, except they need some basic knowledge to communicate with their own IT department. In one case, the researcher went to the IT department and said, okay, I need a lightpath and I need it next week. Obviously, the IT department said they felt as they were not taken very seriously. So to tackle this, the researcher needs some basic knowledge on networking and lightpaths. What are the advantages? What are the disadvantages? What is latency? What is bandwidth, jitter, etc.? And the cookbook will briefly go into this to make sure that the stakeholders, the researcher and the IT department are speaking the same language. Because they didn't speak the same language in some cases, a second problem arose quickly, namely who should the researcher involve when working with lightpaths. In another case, the researcher decided to involve the IT department right from the start, so that went pretty well. They were about to order some devices and spend some money when the security officer received word of the plans. So he reviewed the plans and said, no, this is not going to happen. So the lightpath never came. Had they involved the security officer right from the start, things would have probably turned out well. So if you forget, as a researcher, you forget to involve the right parties at the right time, it's a bad idea. So who to involve? We have the user, obviously. We have the network architect, which is the one who will design the implementation with the campus infrastructure. We have the IT employee, who will do the actual installation, configuration, and testing. Then we have the security officer, who will need to approve everything. And then, last but not least, we have the project leader I talked earlier about. It's someone who will keep the overview of the entire process and who can take decisions when things get stuck. So as a side note, these are 5 different roles. Doesn't mean you have to include at least 5 different people. Some roles can be combined. It's dependent on how the institution has arranged everything, but the cookbook just advises make sure you have at least these roles and responsibilities, otherwise it will go wrong. So next I encountered several other reasons why the integration with the campus network could fail. So the next chapter is about some general project recommendations. Few examples. Make use of external expertise. At the NRAN, at SurfNet, we have a lot of experience and knowledge about networks and lightpaths, so why not come to us, let us help you. Most institutions know they can do it, but when it's time they forget, or they come too late, or they try things to solve things first themselves and it takes way too long, etc. So make use of external expertise. Next one is, before you start with the lightpath, make sure you make a complete end-to-end design of the entire lightpath, not just your part. Otherwise you might run into problems on the other side. Another example, don't forget the extra costs. If you want a lightpath, you have to pay to the NRAN to get the lightpath, but it stops at the POP, the point of presence. So to get it from the POP to where it needs to be, extra money needs to be spent, and it's not on the invoice SurfNet sends you. So please don't forget it. So this is just a couple of examples. The cookbook will contain some more general recommendations. And it's also important to realize these lessons are not only for the institutions themselves, but also for us as an NRAN. So we will definitely take this into account in the following editions of NIT Research. Last but not least, there's a problem of integrating the lightpath with the campus infrastructure. This seems like a very good idea. So questions like, do we route the lightpath through a firewall or not? Or do we use direct fibers to the device of the user, or do we integrate it with our current infrastructure? So on and so on. So the final chapter contains some technical recommendations, of which the most important one in my view, is remember this. This is where the part of the campus network is not ready for the light path. Unfortunately, we see this a lot in our institutions, and this is what we're trying to prevent. So the most important recommendation is separate the networks. Create a specific network for research or light paths, for devices like a cluster, a server, or high-resolution visualization display, and put the rest of the campus on another network, such that the demands of both groups of users can be met. Let me clarify. Suppose the entire campus network is 1 gigabit per second, which is fine for maybe thousands of regular internet users, such as students and other stuff. But there's a researcher who wants to move terabytes of data from one side to another side. He might also need the full bandwidth of the campus network. So if he starts transferring his data, thousands of campus users experience problems or slow or even no internet at all. So if you separate the networks, you can put the researcher on a separate network with either 1 or maybe 10 gigabit if he needs that, and leave the rest of the campus alone. This will probably save the institution a lot of money. So it's more scalable. Another example, the firewall. A firewall is built for a large number of short-lived connections, which is typical for internet use. But a light path, and especially in the case of transferring terabytes of data, is a small number of connections that are active for a long time. So if you put these types of connections to the same firewall, it's asking for problems. You can upgrade the firewall, but in some cases that might cost you a couple of hundreds of thousands of euros. So upgrading is too expensive. The cookbook finishes with some open considerations. It's not my intention to dictate to the campus what they should or should not do. It's more high level. Make sure that you think about this thoroughly in advance, so you know what to expect and you're not experiencing any surprises. So things like a firewall. Do we need a firewall at all? A light path is a point-to-point connection, independent of the regular internet, so you know who's on the other side. If you trust the other side, does it make sense to put a firewall in between? And if yes, where do we place it? Which one will it be? How do we configure it? So my point is, just think of these things in advance, know what to expect, and hopefully everything will turn out well. So thanks to this cookbook, hopefully our institutions will have a lot of, will have no more trouble integrating the light path with their campus infrastructure, such that our users can easily use light paths. The cookbook will be available soon on our website in English. It's currently being translated, so please check back soon. And hopefully, together with all the NRANs across the world, we can make sure that our users are having no more troubles adapting to our technologies. So that was my presentation.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Good morning. Thanks for the talk. There was something I'd like to ask about one of the slides you showed where you had the separation of the campus into two parts, but the lightpath user was on the wrong side of the divide, it seemed.
Yeah.
And I'd also like to mention, before I finish, are you aware of the Science DMZ work, which has been done at ESNet?
Yep.
Because they've been working on this same problem for a number of years and have published a lot of recommendations in this area.
Yeah, this is actually based on the Science DMZ model by ESNet, so yeah.
You didn't mention it.
No, forgot, thank you. Thank you for pointing that out.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Our next speaker is Marcin Wolski from Poznan, PSNC, Poland. He's a network applications developer, and he's going to give some hints and tips on how to move towards successful software development.
That's you. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Marcin Wolski. I work for Poznań Supercomputing and Networking Center in Poland. And today I would like to talk how to move toward successful software development in networking. Before I begin, let me present myself in a few words. So at first, I am a member of Advanced Data Management System team at PSNC, and I share my time with JAM project. I led the development of multi-domain tools within the scope of GM3 project. Now, in GM3+, I am a system analyst for service quality management. So the goal of this presentation is to share the experience and lessons learned about successful software development in networking. So the topic of my presentation is slightly different. I will try to focus on the software side. However, I will put considerable attention on networking area. So I will try to focus on networking, especially on multi-domain environment. I will try to present you some use cases, some real examples, selected real examples coming from our experience in JAM project. And I will try to, and I'm going to tell you and enumerate a few things that we believe that are important in order to achieve a success in software development. Let me try to shape the context of my presentation first and try to explain why the software development is important in networking. So it can be important because it's part of the business. And so it's rather obvious thing. But on the other hand, over the last recent years, we can observe that the emerging network technologies are making the software and network more and more complementary assets. What does it mean? So we've heard much here at TSNC about the technologies like OpenFlow, like SDN, software-defined networks, like clouds, and, for example, network virtualization functions. And those all technologies enable the network to become directly programmable, making it ideal for high bandwidth, for example, and for, let's say, the dynamic nature of today's applications. So from the network point of view, we can say that those technologies, those new open networks and new service management styles and methods may require the rethinking of the existing management procedures in the networks. On the other hand, from the software point of view, it means to put considerable stress on the software quality. And it can also think that we should somehow rethink of how the software development teams and the network operation teams should interact, should communicate, and should cooperate each other to when working on a software. I mentioned in the beginning of my presentation that I would like to focus on multi-domain aspects. So let me explore this issue a bit. If we take the software development lifecycle consisting of several phases, it brings for organization its own requirements on the products and processes. However, if we take the software development lifecycle, which is aimed for more organization, or which is somehow aimed for multi-domain solution, it brings even stronger requirements. Speaking about this multi-domain environment, multi-domain environment or multi-domain world of NRNs is a world of research and education networks, which is brought together by giant community in a one big multi-domain community. Such an environment has more complex operational procedures than single NRN due to the participation of various domains with various policies and procedures. But what is more important, multi-domain service environment which can be similar to the multi-domain environment of NRANs is not so common today. Consequently, I may say that there are no somehow clear recommendations. There is no standard practices or even sometimes common understanding how to organize various multi-domain operations in order to deliver multi-domain services, which makes the development of multi-domain tools supporting those services even more challenging. Okay, that's all when it comes to some, let's say, the introductory slides. Now I'd like to come to the point and tell you and present you 3 particular items we believe that, let's say, significantly important towards achieving success in software development. Those 3 items are software and business requirements management, clear user definition and constant user participation, and software development methodology. I will try to explore, I will explore actually those 3 items in more details in the next slides, taking into consideration my experience and background in the design and development of multi-domain connectivity tools from both SA's and JRA's perspective. Let me start with software and business requirements management. There is, let's say, a wealth of literature. There is a wealth of articles stating about software and business requirements management. Is a very broad topic, and it's not possible to explain everything in details. In a nutshell, when talking about business requirements management, software requirements management, business requirements are intended to place a software into, let's say, a bigger picture in order to determine the value a software delivers to end users. On the other hand, software requirements conform to specific functions a software is aimed to deliver. And what we found really challenging is how to manage properly the business requirements. In other words, how to define a consistent framework in order to define those requirements, to benchmark those requirements, and to apply into the software development process. All in all, it's about, let's say, crushing this metrical wall dividing those 2 worlds, the world of business and the world of software. And in our case, the world of networking and the world of the software teams. And let me present you one particular case when we found the software and business requirements management, let's say, a bit challenging. It's about iShare. So Giant iShare was a tool supporting the delivery of multi-domain wavelength service. Giant iShare, the development of iShare started in Giant 2, then Giant 3, we continued it, and we managed to deploy iShare as a pilot deployment among a few selected NRANs. In the result, we got a valuable feedback from the user community. However, it turned out that some of the requests we got require to complete rethinking, to completely rethinking of the design of iShare. So in some point, we decided to evaluate the iShare goals, the iShare business goals, and we decided, and eventually we decided to map iShare as an integral part of the selected standardized network management process. This was one particular case, which I would like to show you. Of course, there were a lot of many other cases which we somehow encountered, but a few lessons we learned from this. First of all, usually the lack of proper business requirements management is recognized when a software is matured and introduced to end users. then the business requirements analysis might be reduced or even omitted. It may happen that when we kick off, it may happen that the decision about kicking off the software project can be somehow driven by technology innovation only, instead of, let's say, evaluating the business values. And the last but very important thing is that when a solution is being designed for more than one organization, in our case NRN, it might be challenging to consider all relevant processes and business segments individually for each target organization, especially if those potential organizations are not known in the design phase. So those were the lessons we learned, and a few conclusions, or we can say recommendations. At first, to handle the business requirements, let's say, appropriately, we can support it by a cohesive set of best practices, usually inherited from existing frameworks like ETIL. And typically only a subset of, let's say, only a subset of those practices chosen and then carefully adapted to specific conditions. In case of Jant, the product management lifecycle was adapted. The world of standards can help to answer the challenge of business process in multi-domain environment. And as an example, TM Forum Business Process Framework can be taken as a relevant baseline. And moreover, in a dynamically changing environment, especially when it is led by innovation, there should be a periodic review of the main business goals. And the next item concerns users and user requirements. I'm pretty sure that those of you who, let's say, has dealt with the software and who take part in the software development came across, let's say, funny comic books and stories how to manage the user requirements, what are the user definitions, what are my users, what my users expected, what for example, analysts understood, and when finally the users got it. So usually when we start on a project, everything looks simple. So we start with the user definition, then we try to put the users into a bigger picture. Then we try determining how the software can make the, let's say, user behavior or routine practices, how we can make those practices and make it, let's say, operating more smoothly. And then we start user requirements gathering, and then we start implementing it. So everything looks simple, but unfortunately, it isn't so simple in reality. Let me present you another case. And now it concerns CINIS. CINIS is a network repository of all, is a unified repository, let's say, about all relevant network information for one single administrative domain. And CINIS pilot deployment was accomplished, and then the NRNs which took part in the pilot deployment got a, let's say, tool or got a product with a wealth of functionality, because CINIS is able to manage the Ethernet, SDH, and IP layer. CINIS has configurable drivers, so you can easily customize it to your own needs to support your own, let's say, network technologies. However, it turned out that this wealth of functionality caused the user requirements management, let's say, more and more problematic. Because what we found is that those requirements we gathered as a result of the pilot deployment, they sometimes presented contradictory interests. So in some points, after the thorough user requirements analysis, we decided to divide CINIS into two tracks, two parallel tracks. CINIS production track, which is actually developed under the bandwidth on demand service and the bandwidth on demand umbrella. And C is advancement track, which is standard-based resource inventory management. This particular case, of course, the other cases, what this case learned us, at first, users are usually not present and actively involved throughout the whole software development lifecycle. That's one thing. When a project, this particular feature concerns the project which are, let's say, follow according to the waterfall model. Waterfall model assumes that we have very big design, let's say, phase, and then after the very big and long design phase, we deliver the software actually to users. So in such kind of a project, we can say it's waterfall project. The user, let's say, participation usually concentrates on design phase and then on the pilot phase. There is a layer of implicit requirements that don't come directly from end users. So a user won't tell you when something needs to be manageable, when something needs to be consistently configurable, or for example, packaged in a way which is somehow tailored to the user-specific needs like operating system or responsiveness. And the last but not least, when a user is required to have constant interaction, they will typically be expected to be funded for, especially when our user or our, let's say, target customers, stakeholders are network experts, which have usually very less time. Okay, some conclusions and at the same time recommendations. So user requirements usually evolve during the time, and it's highly important to engage them in a more systematic way. Users have to be present and actively involved throughout the whole software development lifecycle. It's important that users evaluate the incremental results of our project, that users take part, the active part in the requirements delivery and evaluation and let's say in collaboration with the existing requirements in order to make it more clearer. The initial assumption and requirements for a long-running project should be periodically checked, evaluated, and changed if necessary. Otherwise, they likely become obsolete. Okay, the last item which I would like to focus on concerns the software development methodology. I chosen 3 particular approaches which I believe fit to the world of NRENST, which fit to our organizations. These are process-oriented approach, agile development, and OSS, open source practices. So a few words about each of them. The process-oriented approach is based on, it's a, let's say, common established, and long-running. It's based on procedures, on restructuring and modeling, and it's based on documentation. So it's process-oriented approach. Then the agile development stays somehow in the opposite way, because it relies on, let's say, information. Agile development relies on people, relies on communication, relies on well-motivated and cross-functional teams. And open source practices, there are, let's say, matured and very broad practices how to build and sustain the communities which take part in the software development in a collaborative manner. So there are no simple rules or guidelines which methodology we should choose. I can tell you what was the motivation for let's say, changes in the preliminary organization of CNIS and iShare teams. So what we would like to achieve was to improve the team efficiency and work progress among project stakeholders. Then we would like to tighten the relationship between project management and the development team. We wanted to have a better understanding of business goals, and we also perceive lack of commonly agreed mechanism of interacting with end users, registering and tracking and analyzing the gathered feedback. So those were our problems, and eventually we decided to go towards agility. In particular, we chose Scrum methodology to organize the CCs and ISO development teams. In a nutshell, we switched to user stories instead of very formal use cases. We started the Scrum ceremonies like sprint planning, sprint retrospective, sprint review. We also divide the software development lifecycle into the smaller, let's say, cycles. It is called sprints. And we try to deliver at the end of this cycle a potentially shippable increment of the product. Moreover, we also set up and established GianForge, which is a place where you can find all relevant resources related with the software, like software binaries, installers, documentation, FAQ. GianForge is also a place where the user community can interact with developers. Lessons learned. I may say that we managed to overcome some of those problems, not all of them. And what we found is that adapting agility in a bottom-up manner without the proper support on the organization level might be challenging. Unfortunately, it usually ends with what is called the quasi-Scrum or waterfall Scrum or almost agile. Applying OSS methodology can gain many benefits for us, like early feedback, builds confidence, shows the project activity. But the most important thing we learned is that the key to deliver high-quality software, which is all about it, are people who are developing the software. So people who has the so-called the ground knowledge, people who knows what to do and how to do. And we cannot somehow place the processes, documentation over the people who developing the software. A few conclusions because the time is running. We think that the agile approach is considered as most matured for achieving the results in timely manner. Then we would propose and realize to adapt the hybrid version of the OSS development. The hybrid version means that the technical part of the open source practices can be somehow adapted as they are. However, when it comes to the project management part of the OSS software development, it should be strictly tailored to the actual project community, let's say, constraints. And to sum it up, at first, this presentation was my and the other co-authors' view on the software, on the good practices in software development, which we somehow inherited from our participation in the Gian project, especially in the design and delivery of multi-domain tools. We would like to stress that solid requirements definition, constant users' involvement, as well as proper development mechanism can be seen as, and we've seen as very important aspects. Then we found agile approach, which is mixed with hybrid OSS practices that can be used as guidelines for NRENs-based development in the future. And last but not least, we also recognize the role of standards as very important to be able to systematically cover and take into consideration different options of the internal organization and business processes. Thank you very much for your attention. There are a few references. If you would like to be interested to learn more, you can find a lot of interesting sources and materials here. Here is my email address. If you would like to contact me, do not hesitate. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Marcin. Any questions?
Thank you. I think you touched on a very interesting aspect in one of your slides about the interaction between the requester or the users and the software teams, and you mentioned something about, you know, the users expected to be paid or to have some budget to, you know, feed the software development teams.
Yes.
And I can only say if that's the case, you know, we shouldn't do the software, because it needs to be based on a need. If you don't have the need, if you're not willing to put in the time to specify what we need to get out of software teams, it should be killed instantly. Because we do software because there's a need, or we should do software because there's a need. If it's not the case, you know, it's not worth spending at least young money on it.
Absolutely, absolutely, that's true, and I entirely agree with you. The software should somehow, well, change the world for better, I would say. So the software should deliver and bring the value for the users. If there is no such a value, it's no reason
also,
to...
Another comment is, I also think in the past projects we had a tendency to have these very big, you know, all-embracing tools and products, you know, who had, you know, very long life cycles. And one of the things that are going to change for sure is that we're going to have many smaller, more agile projects with a clear stakeholder. So we need the user, I mean the stakeholder, to be there and to feed. And they might not be paid to do it, or that they won't. But if that's the way forward to create successful software, at least in my view.
Yep, and again I somehow share your opinions. And as I mentioned today, we believe that the agility is well, the most promising, let's say, approach, most matured and most promising at the same time, because it enables us to divide the whole very long software development lifecycle into the smaller pieces, and then we could constantly somehow evaluate the goals, review the current requirements, and to think and decide in which way we should go with the software.
It sort of reminds me of one of the talks I had with one of my neighbors. He's a partner in a software development company, and he says the way they work, they are basically, you know, the developer, he's constantly in interaction with the customer, saying, do you want this feature or that feature? And basically the customer will say, no, I don't want to pay for that feature, do the other stuff right now. And so if they don't do it the right way, you know, they won't get paid. So they're working really, really agile. Maybe more agile than we'll be able to in this environment, but I think that's at least what's being done out in the industry. So we should look a bit more to that. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you. Jan Perry from Denmark. I was one of the very annoying users who tried the early versions of Zenis. Had a lot of problems trying to install it, because there was some changes from different versions, and the documentation wasn't quite updated. If you're doing some agile development, I think it's very important that each version or sample clearly shows what the level of different functions are. So it's very clear that you don't get a full package at this moment. You get a package where you ought to test out this function because it may work or it may not work, and we'd like to hear some comments about it. When I just get a package and see, oh, it's version 0.2, well, most likely most of it works, but there might be some problems, it might crash. This is not always the case, so I get very frustrated as a user. And, well, it took a year or two before we needed to use the Zenis. Okay.
Thanks a lot for sharing us with your experience with Zenis. Well, I may say that when it comes to the agile approach, the point is that yes, as you mentioned, we try to deliver the software in a frequent manner. But the point is that at the end of, let's say, the cycle, the sprint, whatever we call it, we must deliver a somehow complete and ready to be tested and to use part of the software. So this is the point of agile approaches. And that each of this increment is shippable and is ready to be deployed. And this is the point. And well, it's difficult to me to somehow comment on your experience with Cinis. Well, it was quite a long time ago. But I believe that the Cinis is mature and stable software right now, and you should have no problems.
And to your defense, Marcin, there are also people who manage to install Cinis and this kind of software very quickly in a week without any problems, without asking people. So it also depends on the context where you work. And I work with Jan.
Well, I will support it. I did it 2 weeks ago.
Well, thanks a lot for supporting.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Our next speaker, she's Nicole Gregoire. She's a technology and policy advisor at SurfNet, and she will talk about something that we should not neglect, which is the funding, and she will talk about the funding paradox.
Thank you, Leonidas. Is it on? Oh, yeah. Well, good morning, everyone. When I spoke to Leonidas last Sunday at the speaker's reception, he said that we were scheduled for the so-called graveyard session, the Thursday morning after the gala dinner. I was just wondering whether it was a coincidence that the session is called Bandit on Deathbed. But, well, I'm just happy to see so many people here, and, well, thank you for coming. This one. My name is Nicole Gregoire from SurfNet. I started 3.5 years ago as a community manager research, and since September I work as an advisor on technology and policy. The title of my talk is The Funding Paradox. It's about money, priorities, and involving the end user in what we do. And it touches nicely, I think, upon the lessons learned from Marcin and what Arnout just said. I will illustrate my point using the Bandit on Demand example, but I hope that you were not looking for a really techy talk on Bandit on Demand. So, first of all, I want to warn you, I don't have any answers to the paradox. Actually, I do have a lot of questions, and I would like to discuss these with you. So I hope you all had your coffee and that you are prepared to have some interaction with me and with each other. So the context. I will first start with sketching the context of the point I would like to make. First we have us, the NREN. And SurfNet's mission is to ensure that researchers, teachers and students can work together without barriers through ICT. In most cases, we are working closely together with the IT departments of institutions whose aim is to support and maintain the ICT needs of their users and staff. In the corner sits the researcher, whose goal for life is to do research and write papers. You see, I see 2 times ICT. It's in the mission of the NREN and it's in the mission of the IT department. But there's no ICT in the mission of the user. I'm not saying that they don't use ICT, but it's not in their mission to use it. They're focused on doing research. They will use ICT when the research asks for it. And moreover, as Arnout also just explained, when they're using ICT, they just want and expect it to be there and to work. ICT is not high on their priority list. Speaking of that priority list, imagine that you are a researcher. Well, there are also researchers here in the audience, so... But imagine that you're a researcher who happens to collect quite an amount of data. What is the first thing you need when you find out that your laptop does not suit your data collection anymore? Well, it's storage. Then you start analyzing the data, and you come to a point that you have lack of compute power, and you have a need for a compute solution. Maybe you want to visualize your results. At what point do you come to me? At what point do you come to SurfNet? As an NREN, we do not offer storage solutions. compute capacity or visualization facilities. The classical model for NRENs is that they operate a network. To most researchers, the commodity network is sufficient to their needs. You will only come to me when our already so great network is not sufficient to you anymore. But also then you have other things to do, such as doing research and writing your papers. But I want to know who the researchers are. SurfNet wants to know who the researchers are. For the past years, we tried really hard to engage researchers with what we do. Arnout just already explained one of our activities that has been most successful lately is the Enlighten Your Research contest. Enlighten Your Research started 7 years ago to create awareness about the possibilities of lightpaths among researchers and to stimulate the uptake of lightpaths. In later versions of the competition, we added bandwidth on demand. But as I just told you, bandwidth is on the second page of a researcher's priority list. To make them interested, we seduce them with ICT services that are higher on their list: storage, compute, and also support. This worked. The latest version of the Enlighten Research competition, which ran last year, attracted 18 research groups. In the end, we awarded 3 groups with resources and support. They were awarded free use of the bandwidth on demand service for a period of 2 years. Now it comes, the paradox. I have talked about priorities, but not yet about money. Once the period of 2 years of making free use of the service is over, comes to an end, we start negotiations with the researchers. We just want to keep them using the BOD service, but the service is not for free. It is also not included in the fixed price standard networking package. If researchers want to make use of the service, their institution has to pay for the lightpath port. The fee is based on the operational cost and depends on the implementation type and the speed of the lightpath. Basically, SurfNet charges the institutions, and it's up to them whether they tax the researchers. In most cases they do, to which the researchers decide there are higher priorities to spend my money on. I quit using the bandwidth on demand service. We as SurfNet expected that once bandwidth on demand has been successfully embedded in a researcher's workflow via the Enlighten Your Research competition, they would be more than happy to pay for the continuation of the service. But it turns out that researchers are very positive about BOD. It saves them a lot of time. But in the end, when it turns out that they have to pay for the service, it drops on their priority list and they stop using it. The current BOD business model is not working. Not because there is no interest in the service, but because there is a paradox in how infrastructure services should be funded and where the money actually spent on. The funding of the BOD service is consistent with the vision of the IRGP reflection paper, which says it's logical that funding for operational services is channeled through user communities. In other words, researchers should pay for what they use. However, it is only a vision and not really compelling one for the majority of the researchers. Their only concern is bringing in money for manpower. They just expect, as they have got used to, that high-end ICT services are delivered as a commodity service and that it is paid for by either the government or the institution. But BOD, the bandwidth on demand service, is not and will never be a commodity service. So what is the problem? Is there a problem? It is a closed system. The money flows, and so in the end, it should not make a difference where the money comes from. It only makes a difference in the perception of the ones who pay for it. Is it important to us as NRENs that the end users pay for the services they use? What is the incentive for NRENs to make end users pay for the services they use? Maybe the incentive is not directly money, but in the situation I just sketched, it is harder, and that's also what Marcin just said, it is harder to get commitment from the users. Also, NRENs will never get to know the true value of their services. And high-end services will never mature. They will remain at the uptake level. And I think most importantly, I believe that with the current finance model, NRENs miss the critical customer who pushes the innovation. How to turn the tide? I do not have any answers, I have just more questions. Is payment by end users a valid business model for NRENs? If end users need to pay for the service, will ICT become more important to them, or will they turn their back on it? Will we get commitment from the users? Will we get to know the true value of our services? And will high-end services then mature? On Monday, Baron Mons ended his keynote with a statement that 5% of the research budget should be reserved for data stewardship, including infrastructure. I was wondering, is it the only way to solve the paradox? And another question, what does it mean for the questions I posed on the previous slide? It was just a brief talk. As I said, I want interaction. I want to know your opinion on the questions I just raised. So this is my talk, and hopefully we can have a discussion, and I want to know more. How do you experience what I just said?
Thank you very much, Nicole.
So, are you awake?
Thanks, and thanks so much for that talk. So can I just check I understood the paradox correctly? You're saying that in trying to understand the true value of the service you're offering to the end users, by getting them to pay for it, you might actually kill it. Is that the paradox, or is that an element of the paradox?
Yeah, I believe that the true paradox is if you say that the one who uses the service should pay for it, but in the end, with our service, they don't pay for it. So it's not...
because they don't pay for it?
Yes,
because it's the IT.
Yes,
right.
they don't pay for it.
Okay. And since I've got the microphone, I'll monopolise it for a bit longer. You're saying that one model might be for the NREN to engage with the end user directly. If you go down that route, do you foresee issues perhaps with your current direct customers, the ICT departments? How encouraging or discouraging do you think they'll be for you to engage in that way?
Good question, of course. And we don't do that alone. we involve, of course, the IT department. We involve the institutions by contacting the end users and involving them. And I think we should work together more closely to involve them.
Yeah, right.
Any other questions or comments?
So how's PSNC? Oh, there is.
So my question is there any signs in the sky or anywhere else that this funding paradigm is going to change? That, in Netherlands, that, basically when you apply for research funding, that, instead of, having all the budget going for manpower and other, stuff, there will be, part of it assigned to the infrastructure, because that's where it needs to be targeted, both locally but also in a wider European sense. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. We have close connections with, of course, the National Science Foundation, and we're talking to them to include that every researcher who applies for a grant needs to add an ICT paragraph in it stating. But and sometimes they already do, but they state for compute power how much they need for compute power. They state how much storage they need, but they always forget connectivity. So in the end, and they don't have any money for connectivity. So we are talking to the National Science Foundation to be more precise in the whole infrastructure chain, so that they add all the elements that they need. So, but so that of course that will be a solution, but you need the end users also that they accept that it's going to be that way, because if the money is spent, and of course the money comes to us somehow anyway, but if they recognize that the money is spent, that they have to reserve an amount of their grant for ICT, they know that they cannot spend it on manpower or on PhDs or something. So they get more. I hope that they will also be more involved in the ICT development.
Yeah, I also think it's very interesting because basically instead of funding, maybe this is a bit controversial, but if you fund the NRENs, they'll go out and find the users based on the budget, and so we pay the solutions. But if you put a bit of the funding in the users' pockets, they will, try to find out the most optimum way that we should deliver the services. So you are changing the model quite a lot, I would say, yep. And it would be very interesting.
I hope.
But I think it's the right way because then you feed the user who will then request out to deliver the service they really need. Yeah. So interesting.
Yeah, just the other question is how can you still ask them or make them think more about what they need? Because otherwise they just state, I need a little bit of storage and a little bit of compute power, but they don't think about what they need more. And then in the end, they forgot a lot of stuff. So they think I reserve. So maybe you need a fixed amount. What Baren says, you need 5%. So that they have to think about how to spend the 5%.
I guess also ideally you should work closely with them, even though the budget is transferred directly to their research budget. Somebody needs to sit down with them and say, you need to reserve this and that for,
Yeah.
Probably if you go to a genomics researcher, he won't, they won't always have the skills to, make the calculations themselves. Thank you.
Artur Binczewski, PSNC. I think that we should relate this problem to some situations of the telecommunication market, that if you compare some prices of for the connectivity 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and the current, it is a decreasing dramatically a price of the connections, access to the internet, and some of the transport network. And in this way, the comparison of the NREN services to the commercial market, we will still be cheaper and offer the better services. The problem that the researcher's budget is still usually the same. And the weight of the interest is moving from the connectivity, as was in the past, to the most advanced services, offered in the simple way, providing this connection, storages, computing, federation, etc. It means that it is a case for the NRENs how to change our services, not only business model, how to deliver the whole requested infrastructure, because it is still needed, and how to compare with some kind of the commercial world, which are serving very similar services. That's, for us, is a case how to decrease the cost, how to increase the scope of the services, and how to extend of the community. It means that, in my opinion, the research community absorb of the most of our services. And now our job is to extend of our public communities, for example, e-health, libraries, maybe public administration, who is founded from the taxes, the same as NRENs. And in our opinion, it is also some of the directions of our future.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I just want to do a comment on one thing you said, because I also think that if 5% is reserved for e-infrastructure, and what you just said, we have the commercial world as well. The end user does not have to state where it's going to spend the amount of money. So I think it also keeps us awake, because they can also spend that at commercial providers, and we have to be better with the cost, but also with the services.
I was thinking a bit, of course, your questions made some thoughts. And one possibility was that the NREN should bypass the ICT on the university and go directly to the user. That's not the way we used to do things. And of course, it's very difficult for me as an NREN to say, well, we can do this. But then on the other hand, I thought, well, we have some other institutions like Nordonet, like Xiang, like Dante, who are able to deliver some services. And if they are going to deliver some services to the universities or even to the end users, they need to bypass me, because I'm an NREN. And so I started thinking, well, what is my problem about this? And first of all, it's feelings. I should be able to deliver this service. I'm not. That's why they want to bypass me. My second thought is, well, now they're giving it away for free, and they're paying some of the expenses which are needed to deliver this service. But what in the long run? Am I going to pay for this service afterwards? And I could see the universities would feel exactly the same if I go directly to some researcher and say, well, now we give you a light pass and we'll make sure you have a fiber. What happens tomorrow when I don't fund it anymore and the universities have to pay? So in that respect, I think it's very important that the rules are very clear, that this is a paid service for now and forever. Like you suggested with the bandwidth on demand, it is not going to be a part of what the university should pay to the INRAN. So if they want to use the bandwidth on demand, go do it and pay for it. The last thing is the knowledge. How much do I need to know when I'm being bypassed? Because I still have to deliver some connectivity, but the upper organization, Nordonet, Xiang, Dante, whoever it was, needed to tell me exactly what to do, because I wouldn't have the manpower and the knowledge to deliver this service.
But your last point touched upon what Arnout just presented about involving everyone. And I think that we should not talk about competitiveness, that people are bypassing one another. I think we all have the same mission, and that is to ensure that our end users can use ICT to their own needs. So I think that that we should not see each other as competitors and bypassing each other, but that we should really work closely together. And if someone else offers a service, then we should work together, and they offer the service. And another point, we offer the service. So yeah, we have to work it out for the future. I mean, things are changing, and roles are changing, and the world is changing. But I want to be careful by using the word bypassing and yeah. You want to say?
Yeah, I just want to contradict my CTO as usual and say that it's never been the business model ever of bandwidth on demand services within the Géant service area to bypass the NRANs. It's always been, you know, there's nothing like Nordonet or Géant bypassing the NRAN in bandwidth on demand services, and you should know that. Please.
So I guess this will be a reply.
Indeed, it will. No, I'm really not thinking negative about when I use the word bypass. I mean, I have some priorities. I have some knowledge. I have some abilities with the people I work with. So if somebody comes up with some great new idea, this might not fit into my business model. This doesn't mean that we shouldn't do our very best to help this organization deliver this service. But I won't really participate in it because it's not in the business model. So I don't see it as competition. I see it as, well, I just have to get over those feelings and then support delivery of services which I don't want to deliver myself. And of course, if I at some point want to deliver the service myself, I should do it.
Tanguy?
There's one more there.
Yes.
Well, thank you for keeping the discussion alive. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm from HEANet, and we've been asking about how this model has to be funded for a long period of time. We do actually proportionally charge our clients for connectivity. That's every time we create a single point-to-point circuit, we charge them a proportion of it. But the problem I see with on-demand services is it's on demand, so it's not there all the time. So you're into a second level of accounting and traceability. And that is not evident in any of the models at the moment.
Thank you. Yeah.
Any other comments or opinions? Well, that will be it. Thank you very much for attending. Have a safe way back to your homes and families.